In this lesson, we'll start working on our virtual pet game. We'll begin with a basic phaser game structure, and we'll end up in this lesson with some sprites being shown on the screen. We're also going to make sure that we have the right setting for the screen scaling. So let's begin. What we have here is an object that will be a state in our game, and that object contains some methods that are used by Phaser. The init method takes care of some game level settings. You can also put those settings just in create, but in this case we're separating what it is the initiation of the game on a top view, you could say, from the specifics of what happens after the assets were loaded. So that's why we're using now init and create instead of putting it all in create like we did in the previous game. Then all we're doing is creating a new phaser game and adding in the state. So let's begin. The first thing we'll take care of will be the screen scaling options. So we'll set the scale mode, which will be the one that's called show all. We need to access the scale manager and then show all. What does show all do? Basically, it will keep a certain aspect ratio of the screen, which will be this one. And if you increase the size of the screen or you decrease it, the game scales accordingly. We also want to have this centered both horizontally and vertically. So we set page align horizontally to true, and the same thing with page align vertically. These are all options of Phaser that we can use. Now, what are we going to preload? I have here some image files. We want to load all of those files, and including one of them which will be a sprite sheet. So let me open that with this program that I use in Linux called Color Paint, but it's similar to the program called Paint in Windows or any basic image opener. So some things that I want to show you about this particular sprite is that it has a margin of 1 pixel. So there's 1 pixel around the image. So we'll need to specify that when we load it. And then there's a spacing of 1 pixel between all of the images. So that's what I want to show you. Instead of just typing every single one of the images, I'm gonna copy and paste the corresponding code. And all we're doing here is specifying the location of each one of those images and giving them a label. So these are all the images that I just showed you on that folder. And what about the sprite sheet? So whenever you're unsure about what a method does, like what the parameters are, what these numbers mean, you should use the Phaser documentation to sort it out. So in our case, everything that you access from load is part of an element called the loader. So if we go to Phaser documentation in docs, let me just show you how I got there, docs.phaser.io, and then you'll find here the loader. So I want to go to the loader and click on the loader object, and then go to methods. We want to see what the methods do. In this case, I'm using the sprite-sheet method. And as you can see, what we do with the sprite-sheet method is specify a certain key, a certain path for our image, then the width and the height of each frame, how many frames we have, and then a value for the margin, which I showed you was 1 pixel, and the spacing, which is also 1 pixel. So we have now that sorted. We should be loading those images. I'm just going to reload the page, see if there's any errors so far. It's all good. No errors. And now we want to show these sprites, and that's how we're going to end this lesson. So I'm going to start by showing the background. And the reason why I'm creating the images inside of this is so that I can access them inside of other methods, because we will create other methods later, and I want to be able to access the background or some of the other elements, or I might not need to, but if you do need to, then you need to use this. Otherwise, if you use var, it will only be available inside of create. So let's just add some sprites, game.add.sprite, location of the top left corner, and the label of this image is backyard that we load in here. Now let's load the pet as well. This.pet, this.game.add.sprite. Let's just give it an initial location, because then we'll be moving this pet. Also, I'm going to set the anchor point of the pet just to the middle, because then it's easier to place it. And I'm also going to give the pet some custom properties. This pet.custom params. And this is not an official phaser thing. This is just a convention that I'm using to add some extra parameters to the sprite that I want to keep track of. So we want to keep track of the health of the pet. Let's give it an initial value of 100. And the fun, how much fun it's having, will be 100 as well. Now let's add the apple. This.apple, this.game.add.sprite. Location of the apple is 72, 100, and 570. And we have the apple. The location of the elements in this case, that is something that you could do if you have if you've made an image of what your game will look like. Then you can get an approximate estimate of where the location should be, and then once you see it on the screen, you can tweak it until it looks the way you want it to look. So basically, I'm just duplicating this, and now I'm going to replace some of the labels, some of the names. So I want to have the candy. The candy will be 144. And also want to have the toy, and the toy will be placed in 216, and the rotation button will be in 288. This is called this.rotate. If I reload the page now, I can see now the final, the way the game is going to look. So I have the pet, and I have the user interface, which I'm just noticing that this should actually be a different value. This should be rotate. And there we have the basic interface of our pet game. So to summarize, what we did here was start with a basic game structure. You have the init method to set some game level settings. You have preload to carry out the preloading of your assets and images and sprite sheets, and then create, which is executed once after preload finishes loading all of the elements. And in create, we basically display the sprites on the screen. We place them where we want them to be.